It's Kuzo here, back with another video, and in this video today we're going to be doing another splash page, and this one is from Kimetsu no Yaiba. The characters in this splash page are going to be none other than Tanjiro and Nezuko. Like most of my current videos, this isn't only going to be just the sketch portion, but I'm also going to be traditionally inking this illustration in this video as well. Even though I really do like working traditionally and inking traditionally, I really don't do it that often. I typically just use my iPad Pro and Clip Studio to do all my work in and finish my works, color, ink, and all that stuff. Because just the supplies and ink and paper, all that sorts of stuff ends up adding up to quite a bit of money over time. And for example, I've already invested in my iPad and I can do everything that I'm doing here on my iPad just as fluently. Which just comes down to really which one costs less for me. And I've already invested in the iPad Pro, so I already have it around, which means I have this unlimited, supply of technical ink, and then also paint and brushes and stuff like that. And some people may say, well, there's a different aesthetic to it. It looks different when there's a digital ink versus a traditional ink. And in a lot of cases that can be true, but for me, for the most part, if you look at the difference between my digital inks and my traditional inks, there's not much of a difference. Because one of the things I really try to do when I'm working digitally and inking digitally is I try to think of it as if I'm doing it traditionally, so that way all the skills that I learn on there, I end up being able to bring over traditionally. That's one of the biggest reasons why I try not to use all the digital tricks in order to get the same result as traditionally, because if I just learn the same skills, it can easily translate between both of them. That's why my digital and traditional inking looks so similar. I want to go from, traditional inking to digital or digital to traditional and have to memorize two different ways of doing something. I'd rather it just be all nice and cohesive and it looks the same on both traditional and digital for me. Now, painting and coloring is a whole other ballgame when we talk about trying to stay cohesive and, keep the same techniques, because there's a bunch of different things you can do traditionally and digitally that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do in the other medium, you know what I'm saying? But that's one of the reasons why when I started learning how to color digitally, I never learned how to color traditionally because I just did not have the funds or means to do so. But basically, I try to keep the process down to a minimum of, the tricks that you can use digitally in order to make something look good. I try to keep that down to a minimum and learn the basics of actual painting and color and values and stuff like that, because I knew that would be able to translate over to grayscale, my inking, and just everything traditionally as well. In any case, let's end that little traditional versus digital segment there. I do actually want to save a lot of that stuff for an actual traditional versus digital video that I want to create in the future, because I think it's going to be really fun to create and talk about. But yeah, so let's talk about the illustration a little bit. See, I got Nezuko up here at the top behind Tanjiro, who's down there with his sword, kind of holding his sword at us with the, whole water power from his sword kind of flowing around the whole paper. And pretty much, I was going for the composition of a straight line upwards for the characters. You can see them if you just look straight up the whole page. You can see both characters, as well as the water from the sword is kind of swirling around and kind of highlighting both Nezuko and the top of Tanjiro. So one thing I tried to actually be conscious of while drawing this was I wanted to try to be a little bit more simplistic with my clothing wrinkles and all that stuff, because one thing I've noticed was I would try to be a little bit more complicated with my clothes wrinkles than I needed to be, and so some parts would be complicated and some parts would be a little bit more simplistic, and my mind was getting confused on whether I should go complicated with clothes wrinkles or simplistic. So my whole goal here, and with my last video with the 7 Deadly Sins, was I tried to be a little bit more simple just with the overall clothes shape in general. And so far it's been something that's been working out for me, and I'm going to kind of continue seeing where that leads me in my style. For those of you who might come in and ask about style, I don't really focus on my style that much when I'm drawing. And even when I'm learning, I just kind of try to learn the things that I like a lot. And I feel like style comes once you get to a certain level of understanding of what you're doing and understanding of what style is and what creates style. If you're a beginner, I wouldn't focus on style. I would focus on learning things that you really like and you really want to draw. When I say not focus on style, I mean more so don't focus on trying to create your own style, because at this point in time, you don't really have the means to do so if you're a beginner. And of course, there's always exceptions to this, and it's not bad to try to think about style, but a lot of the time it's just we don't know enough about drawing in order to actually create a style. Because I remember back when I was trying to make my own style, and I really just didn't understand what I was doing enough, and I spent so much time trying to figure out a style instead of just learning what makes a style and learning form, perspective, and all this other stuff that even creates 2D art in general. Yeah, I was talking about all that stuff when we had already started inking, and now we got a lot of the line work done. So let's talk a little bit about what I'm using to ink. I'm using a 0.5 Sakura Micron, like the 0.5 Sakura Micron, and I switch between 0.5 and 0.3 only for when I'm doing smaller detailed things. This gray pen here, I believe, is a 0.1, and it's pretty much the same exact thing as the Sakura Micron, and I prefer the Sakura Microns over that one. It's one of the pens I had lying around that's similar to the Sakura Microns, but like I said, I just prefer the Sakura Microns. I mean, they both work pretty similarly, and in a lot of stores, you know, depending on what country you live in, but a lot of stores have Sakura Microns and also that Pigma liner, I believe it's called. And this is one of the Copic versions of these liners, and they're all within the same family of kind of line pens and stuff like that. Really don't find a huge difference between all of them when drawing with them. So I mean, if you get any of them, I really feel like the size is what matters in what I'm using here, because other than that, you'll just be getting it for this pure aesthetic of how it looks, because most of them just, you know, they all work pretty much the same, at least in my opinion. Pens I use throughout this whole illustration are pretty much just a 0.1, a 0.3, and a 0.5, and a 0.8, as well as a Sharpie. Can't forget the Sharpie. Yeah, there's actually another pen that I started using at some point when I started doing the hair and stuff like that. It's called a Pentel Stylo, and I've never really seen that pen around. I got it at some art store a while ago, and I just never really used them, and I was like, you know what, I should actually use this so I can just, you know, save some ink on these other ones and, you know, get rid of the ink in it. So I started using it. It's a pretty nice pen, but it's called a Pentel Stylo, and overall it's a pretty interesting pen. Right now I'm just using the Sakura Micron 0.5 pen, and like I said, and then I moved to the Copic 0.8, and I'm just using the 0.8 for a lot of these big lines for this, you know, water and stuff like that. And what I'll do is I'll end up going in with the 0.5 and creating a lot more detail within the shapes that I've already established with this bigger pen. So now on the bottom here I have some water splashing up, and one of the things I was trying to keep in mind with this whole illustration was trying to really fill up the whole page as much as possible with effects and stuff like that, trying to make it feel full. The water really helped with being able to do this, because other than that, I would either have to put in background or other effects to kind of accomplish this. I mean, technically speaking, I could zoom up on the characters, put them in different positions, and have it fill up the page a lot more and have less rooms for like background effects, and that actually works too. But I kind of had an idea for this when I was going about it, to try to fill up most of the page with water and then them, and how to do it with the composition. And just to talk a little bit about the water, a lot of the techniques I'm using to ink this water are techniques I initially learned digitally. As almost all of my inking and coloring that I've learned and the techniques I've learned almost all of them digitally. So I thought it was going to be really interesting to try out these kind of techniques traditionally with these pens, and it turns out it really does just kind of work the same. You know, I didn't really expect it to work any differently, but it was nice to see that the techniques that I was using digitally really did translate over to traditional as well as I thought they would. And basically at this point I really wanted to make sure I got all of the water and the detail on the water done before I moved on to doing a lot of the finishing details with the characters, because I already have all the line work done for them. So I wanted to get the biggest, hardest part out of the way after I had, you know, solidified how I liked them to look with the lines and stuff. I wanted to get all this water out of the way. So that way, essentially when I'm finished with the water, the rest of the illustration will be just, you know, blackouts, detailing, and kind of just bringing the whole illustration all together. And now there's a part that's going to come up here in a second where I start doing all the inking of the water below kind of Tanjiro's crotch area. I accidentally end up going into water detail right there into his pants because I was so focused on doing all the detail I didn't realize that I was going into his pants line, so that's something I had to go and fix later on. Now we have already erased all of the pencils pretty much. I erased a portion of it on the video, and then I erased the rest of it off the video because I didn't really want erasing time to take up too much of the video. So I erased most of the pencils, and now I'm going in with the pencils to create kind of the textures and details I know I need to ink in. I don't always do this, but I wasn't feeling confident enough with the blackouts on this to not do it. So I wanted to make sure I went in with pencil and kind of established where I was going to put in the blacks before I actually put in the blacks. And this isn't something I do very often, but it's something that I found to be very useful in this specific case. It definitely helped me out because there's a lot of different details and patterns on their clothing that I wanted to make sure I got right. And after erasing all the pencils that were there previously, I noticed there's a lot of lines I had to go in and fix, so I eventually do that as I'm doing all this stuff too. And here, once we get up to Nezuko and start inking, you'll notice that I actually start blacking out over a portion of something I had already inked, not at this second exactly, but right here I'm going to start doing it. Basically, I ended up forgetting the outer jacket to her design, and I had to end up, just blacking out over it, and that's how I ended up fixing that mistake, because for some reason I missed that, and I was like, oh no, she actually has that. This is an outer jacket on top of her kimono. So I ended up having to fix that, and that's kind of how I fixed it. It was actually a good thing that this was black, so I could just, black out over it. It was a white outer jacket, I would have had to have used white out, which isn't like the end of the world or anything. Yeah, in the beginning of inking her hair, I started using that Pentel stylo. It was kind of like a maroonish color. I ended up stopped using it for a second. I came back here with it because I have two versions of that. It's the same pen actually, but one of them ran out of ink, so I had to find the other one, and I'm just using it here because I knew I wanted to use the pen in order to really, save some ink on my other pens. So that's the Pentel stylo. It's a very interesting pen. It has a much different tip, but as you can see here, I'm also using a Sharpie to fill in the black areas that I don't want to use the stylo or any of my other pens to fill in those black areas, because if I do, I'm just wasting the ink in them really. This is honestly one of the things that I don't miss about traditional work, is the fact that you sometimes have to worry about running out of ink on stuff. And that's one thing I like about digital work, is you kind of just go along and you're thinking about the art itself and not worrying about running out of something. And basically digital work has gotten to the point where it's so good, and that you can draw on the screen, and the iPad Pro I feel like represents, digital to traditional so well that there's not that much of a difference between what you do traditionally and what you do digitally once you have that kind of tablet with that level of accuracy. But at the same time, I do also have a G pen that I just haven't been using for a long time, and maybe I'll do a traditional illustration with that sometime. So, because I know everyone likes seeing dipping pens going on the inking sessions, because they're really fun to watch, and I really like to ink with them too. They're really fun. It's harder to run out of ink with those. I mean, you can obviously, but the bigger bottles, if you buy them in bulk, they're a lot cheaper, and stuff like that is a lot easier to not have to worry about running out with. But when it comes to these pens that are disposable pens after they run out, that stuff, these run out very fast. They're not very, they don't have a long lifespan when you're inking stuff like this. But that's another reason why I do go back to doing traditional inking here and there, because it's something fun to do. And basically at this point in time, I have pens to use, and when I run out of them, I'll eventually buy some more, but majority of my stuff will be done digitally, so that way You know, I can learn everything on there. You know, it's less money, and then if I really want to get back into the traditional aesthetic and feel of things to have something physically in my hand, I can do it here and there. And I guess it's just something that you can kind of do as a change of pace while still keeping the techniques and everything somewhat similar. But in any case, if you guys want to help support my artists, help support what I do on the channel, you can check me out on my Patreon, link in the description. And I would like to take this time to thank my current Patreons: 19 Black Dragon 89, Aaliyah Williams, Aaron McQuiston, Alpha Dog Studios, Anya, Benjamin Thoma, Connor, Daniel Hilliard, Daniel Hutchinson, Dope Closet, Grimoff, Ian Dobb, Joe, Johnny Boy Draws, Josh Aguilera, JT, Kyla Smith, Leo McIntyre, Licor, Marek Karaz, Maracuzio, Monso, Nate Lee, Noah Henderson, Prathana, Ryan, Satoshi, Slow Days, Safine, Spencer Davis, Arjun, Wear My Crown, Res Fletcher, William, and Woody Olis. You guys are the best pencil snowbies there are, and help me be able to do what I do on this channel. But in any case, I hope you guys liked this video, and if you did, please hit that thumbs up button. And if you're new to this channel, like you see, please subscribe, hit the bell icon to get notified when each video comes out. And like always guys, I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you guys in the next video.